Hi, today I want to talk about 10 gorgeous cold climate perennial flowers that you can grow from seed. I myself live and garden in Anchorage, Alaska. We're a zone 4B here and we have long winters, so I'll be starting all of these indoors quite early on. All of these varieties are great for cut flowers. They'll look great in your garden, in your landscape. A lot of these varieties I have actually grown in years past. I've grown successfully from seed, so I can let you know what that experience was like, how difficult or easy the seeds are to grow. And some of these are new for me, but I have done some reading up. I have talked to people in the area who have a little bit more experience with those type of flowers, so I'll let you know about those as well. I'll have a list up on the screen of all the different varieties that I'm going to talk about. And I'll go through them in no particular order, but I will save my top three, my favorite three perennial flowers for cold weather for last. So the first flower that I want to talk about is Shasta Daisy. Now, there are a lot of different varieties of this that you can pick up, and maybe some have different amount of cold tolerance. This variety is zone 5 through 9, but I did get it from Denali Seed Company. I'm expecting that it will do well in my area. Typically, I think in a zone 4B, you can attempt to overwinter maybe zone 5 plants outside if you mulch it, if you put it in a sunny spot. So that's what I'll be doing with these plants. I have grown these successfully from seeds for a couple of years. I just actually never got them planted in the ground here at our house. I did in the previous apartment that I lived in. So I don't have any of these currently in the garden. Really just my fault because I just let them sit in their seed trays and get dried out and die. Last year there was a lot going on in our garden. My focus was on a lot of different things, my vegetables, the hoop house. But this year I'm going to focus a lot on really filling out and building all the flower beds that I want to. And these I'm hoping will make a great statement. Brendan, my boyfriend, loves these flowers. I have noticed in the area, in the neighborhood that he grew up in, there are a bunch just along the sides of the roads. So I'm excited to be planting them so that he can enjoy the garden more. I'd say daisies are pretty easy to grow from seed. These definitely were. They do need light for germination, so you don't want to really cover the soil when you plant it or your cell packs. You can sprinkle some vermiculite on top. Make sure to keep that surface of the soil moist so that it can actually germinate. But that's the only tricky thing. That's the only thing you'd have to look out for when germinating these Shasta daisies. The next flower I want to talk about are scabiosa, or pincushion flowers. Not all pincushion flowers are perennial. I am growing these. They're part of the Fama series. I got them from Johnny Seeds. So I have Fama White and Fama Deep Blue. Scabiosa are perennial in zones 3 to 7. I do already have a few of these plants in my front garden. Not very many. You lost a lot of plants that I started from seed before, but those took well. I didn't get any blooms the first year. I might have if I put them in earlier in the season last year, but I got them in pretty late. Hoping they overwintered well. I could give you an update on that once the snow melts off. Right now they're underneath like 4 feet of snow. It's been a lot in the past couple of days. These make great cut flowers and they also make great dried cut flowers. So if you wait until, the blooms are fully done, until they start to go to seed, they have this super interesting, funky looking, weird seed pod. There's not quite anything else like it. I always like to have a different variety in the garden, just something else, something different to look at, and that will be fun to see. Next, I'll talk about another plant that I have already grown successfully from seed and I do have already established in my garden. I've grown these for a couple of years from seed. It's called eryngium, or sea holly is the common name. And the varieties that I've grown are blue glitter and white glitter eryngium. So I have a couple of these in the garden already. I would say I wasn't really able to harvest anything from them in the first year, but the second year they did bloom a lot more, and I felt okay taking a cutting from it. The places where I planted them are not necessarily in full sun, so maybe if they did have that, I would have been able to harvest the first year if you plant it early enough, but I'd say second year is more reliable for harvest. I'd say these aren't so difficult. Maybe they're like a medium difficulty in terms of growing them from seed. They need light for germination, but they grow and germinate really slow. So it'll just be a long time you have to monitor it and make sure it's moist on the surface because it needs light. And so if it dries out, that might ruin it, or, you know, you just have to keep an eye on it for quite a while, which is the only thing that really makes it difficult. I believe these plants form tap roots, so you don't want to keep them in their cells that you're growing them in for too long, or you want to make sure you give them enough space. Otherwise, they'll just kind of stall out, which has happened to me before, and they'll just take a long time to grow once you transplant them. I didn't see really any difference for a very long time after I transplanted mine, and maybe that's because I had them in the cell packs for too long. But it does say to start them 10 to 16 weeks before your last frost date, and that's because it's just a slow growing kind of plant. But this is great. Again, another very interesting shape, very pretty colors. They're great for having as fillers or different accents in flower arrangements. And also they dry really well. I've dried a bunch of mine. The thing that I have to keep in mind for drying this next year is going to be the way that I hang them and making sure they don't all hang out at weird angles, to dry at weird angles. And also to make sure that I do cut them and harvest them when they're ready, not to do it too early, otherwise the stems are pretty flimsy and it does get kind of crooked. And then I have perennial lupine. You do want to check, I think for all varieties, for any flower that you're planting, especially if you're starting them from seeds and not getting them from a local grower, just check to make sure that they're not invasive in your area. I know that lupine can be invasive in some areas. For here in Anchorage, Alaska, we actually have native species of lupine, not exactly this one that I'm planting. I might try and get and grow the native species as well, but they sell both on Johnny Seed. I have this one called Perennial lupine. And I have not grown these from seed before, but I do know that maybe the only difficulties in starting these from seeds are that they're so big. Outer kind of shell of the seed is so thick that you want to soak it overnight before you do get them planted. Or what I've also seen is you can take some sandpaper and just rub and scarify the outside of the seed just so it accepts moisture a little bit better. The other thing that you want to look out for is that the roots of lupine are pretty fragile, so transplanting is pretty difficult. You don't want to let your seedlings get root bound in the pots that you start them in the nursery pots, so making sure to plant them out when the time is right and trying not to fuss so much with the roots when you do transplant them out. I'm really excited to have these in my garden. What I am hoping for the backyard, sort of where my compost is now, and to create a little flower bed along a walkway from the garage. I do want to create a more cottage garden type of feel, and I think lupine and any of the ones with the big flower stalk, I think those will look amazing in that area, so I'm very excited to have these and start growing them. Next, I will talk about two different varieties of flowers that I think are quite similar. They look quite similar as well. Perennial sunflowers and perennial rudbeckia. So both of these have an annual variety, an annual type to them, but these perennial versions have smaller blooms. They kind of grow in the same habit to each other and not to their annual versions. So the perennial sunflower, I have maximillian sunflower, and it has a lot more branches and a lot smaller blooms. They're not like the big sunflower bloom like you would expect, but they do grow pretty tall. I think they look very cool. I think it would be very cool to try. I think these are pretty straightforward to grow. I have grown them successfully from seeds and I planted them out. They're dead now because we ran over them with the lawnmower. So this year I'll have a more established border around that area of the garden that I'm hoping to put them in, and hopefully that will protect it. And for the perennial rudbeckia, it's called brown-eyed Susan, and this is in contrast to the annual version of rudbeckia a lot of you know as black-eyed Susan. Those blooms are very big, very gorgeous. I just love it. My neighbor last year grew them, and against the red of his house, which is the same red color as mine, it just looked so amazing. So I'm planning on growing those annuals as well this year, or trying it out. But I also wanted to try this perennials. He did tell me that he tried the perennial version and didn't have so much success with it. I would say these are pretty difficult to start from seed. I have never before, but I am trying it out this year. I tried to do as much research as I can, and this requires, I don't know if it requires, but it suggests 30 days of chilling. So right now I already have it in my fridge in soil, keeping moist in the fridge to chill for 30 days. If you have a less harsh winter than me, I think you can keep it outside and maybe winter sow it. But other than that, just that, making sure that you have that cold stratification, I think that's the biggest thing you have to look out for when starting these from seeds. And another perennial that I'm growing are Iceland poppies. And these are very airy, flowy looking. I think they look gorgeous. I'm very excited to see where I can plant this in my garden. I have successfully grown these from seed and grown them in my garden and harvested from them. But I did not keep them alive well enough for them to survive the winter. They were, in fact, dead before the winter came. So these are perennial in zones 4 to 9, but really only if you have the proper growing conditions or provide them with the proper growing conditions. They don't tolerate heat very well. So if you have them in, too warm a spot or too sunny a spot, what happened for me was it was in a flower bed that's pretty sandy, that doesn't have a lot in it just yet. And so I think the ground just got so heated up in the direct sun that it was just too hot for the plants, the few plants that I had in there. But I am hopeful that if I put them in a different spot and if I put more of them to sort of cover the ground and protect their roots and keep them, well watered, that they will do fine and be perennial. Also with poppies, another way to kind of make them perennial or to ensure that you get them again the next season is to plant enough of it so that it'll probably reseed itself. And these are quite susceptible to reseeding themselves. So as long as you, keep them healthy, you let the flowers go to bloom and go to seed on the stalk and just keep that there and don't clean it up until the next season, and don't disturb the soil too much. They do need to be surface sown. Then I think you're more likely just to have it. I have random poppies just like growing in my garden from probably what the owners before us grew. The variety that I'm starting is Champagne Bubbles Mix. And I would say it is maybe a little bit more difficult, maybe medium to hard difficulty growing these from seed, just because they are so tiny and you do need to surface sow them. And they're pretty fragile in my experience, so it is hard transplanting them. You want to make sure you don't disturb their roots too much or disturb the whole plant so much. And don't let them get root bound as well. Otherwise, again, they'll stall out and they'll not bloom for you very well. But I think they are great for the area because they like cool temperatures. They don't like to be too warm. And in here where I live, it very rarely gets above 70 degrees in the day. So we've got a cool summer, and hopefully, I can have more successful plants just if I take care of them better. I think a bonus one, speaking of plants that reseed itself, another reliable flower that reseeds itself, it's not technically a perennial because it's not the same plant that you'll have, but a lot of you may know this if you have ever grown borage, but that will just, readily reseed itself where it was. It's just so prolific in how many flowers it produces, just one plant, that I think you're very likely to have more growing the next season. So that's kind of just a bonus. They're not technically a perennial, but they do come back year after year. You get a lot out of it. Now, for my top 3 perennials that I think are great for cold climates or northern climates, one is, maybe my favorite is Delphinium. Well, maybe not my favorite. I don't know. All 3 of these are really good. But yeah, so one of them is Delphinium. I am growing Magic Fountains Mix and the Belladonna Mix, both from I picked up from Johnny Seeds. I already have successfully grown the Belladonna Mix last year from seed, and they're in the garden right now. I'm sure they'll be fine. A lot of people grow this in my area. The belladonna are ones that will bloom their first year, and they did for me. I was able to harvest from it last year and get a lot of pretty things. I dried a lot of those flowers, so I still have some of them to look at. And the Magic Fountains mix, I think you can get a bloom your first year if you put it in early enough, if you start them early enough. I have already started them from seed a few weeks ago. Hopefully I do get the flower stalks this year. But I also know that the more established these plants are, the bigger and more gorgeous the blooms are. And they can get really big, like definitely bigger than people. I've seen 7-foot tall Delphinium stalks, just full of these big striking flowers. So I'm extremely excited about these and to find places that I can really establish them and have them grow into those gorgeous focal points of the garden. I don't know if I would consider these particularly difficult, but they do sometimes take a long time to germinate. And in my experience, they tend to come up at different times if you're starting a bunch of seeds. And you want to start more seeds than you need because the germ rate isn't always super reliable for Delphinium in particular. Not all of your seeds will bloom. It says about 70 or 50 for the belladonna mix. And I'd say that's right. That's what I've experienced in terms of how much comes up. Sometimes some seeds will just take a lot longer and, come up out of nowhere after you already have like a bunch of true leaves on your other plants. But I would say these just require patience and to make sure that you sow a lot of them and that you're not counting on each one to germinate. They also take a little bit of time, so they recommend 10 to 16 weeks before your last frost or before you plant them out. Another amazing perennial plant, not just for cold climates, but this does well in a lot of climates. They're perennial from zones 3 to 10, are Echinacea. And I have a few different seed packs of Echinacea that I'm gonna grow. I have the Paradiso mix from Baker's Creek. I have Cheyenne Spirit, which I have grown last year as well. And I have the classic, the purple coneflower, Echinacea purpurea. And these are great. They're pretty unique in their shape, although they have those pretty daisy-like petals. You have the middle of the flower bloom just sticking up. Very cute looking flower, and they're very reliable once they're established. So I've successfully grown the Cheyenne Spirit. And this variety is one that blooms its first year that you start from seeds. I think the other ones are not guaranteed to bloom the first year. It might just need a while to fully establish itself. I think it also depends on where you're putting it in your garden, how long your growing season is, how much sun it's getting. So I'm hopefully going to try and put them in full sun parts of the garden so that maybe they'll bloom for me this year, but I won't count on it. For me, actually, the Cheyenne Spirit didn't even bloom the first year. I have them in the ground and they were just leaves. Again, I did let them get root bound in their cell containers. I'm quite sure that I put them out quite late in the summer, even towards the end of the summer. So I'm hoping that they establish well enough in the ground and are okay. But I'll try again a bit earlier this year and maybe I'll see how reliable that first year bloom is for Cheyenne Spirit. But these seeds are very easy to grow and germinate. I'd say it's very straightforward, simple. For the purple Echinacea, the classic purpurea, that it says to chill for 7 days in the refrigerator, the same way that I would do the rudbeckia tribola, the brown-eyed Susan. So that's maybe the only complication or thing to look out for, but I think that only helps, and you can probably start them without that cold stratification and they'll do pretty well. I would just start more seeds than plants you need. And finally, again, one of my favorite things to grow, I have a lot of these in the garden and I'm just so happy that I started them, are Yarrow. I am growing the Summer Pastels Yarrow from Johnny Seeds. I have a bunch of them in the garden already and I want to put in even more, so I'm starting a bunch more this year. They were very easy for me to grow indoors. They germinate at high temperatures and they can stay in high temperatures. So some of these seedlings that like to grow on after they germinate in colder temps, I have to move down to the garage where I have lights set up where it's just colder in there. But these yarrows will probably just stay in the office. They take a while, as you know, most perennials do. It recommends to start them 8 to 10 weeks before the last frost. But these are very hardy. I'd say once you have like your seedlings looking good, I let mine languish in the tray for a long time before I planted them out, and they did really well. I was able to harvest a bunch from them. They looked great. They have just this soft, like detailed, delicate look to the garden, which is great. It's great for the cottage spaces that I want. It just gives a different look. It kind of softens up these bigger, bolder blooms, and the foliage looks super interesting as well. So I harvested a bunch of them last year, and I dried a lot of them, and they're really great dried. I can't wait. A lot of why I'm planting more is because I love the look of it, but also because I want a ton more dried flowers this year. So these, if I haven't already mentioned, they're zones 2 to 9, so they can grow in a lot of different areas, and they establish themselves very well. The ones that I have already will start to like bulk out and will start to, proliferate, create new plants from them. Whereas there are a few varieties in here that are more short-lived perennials. Example, the scabiosa is kind of a short-lived perennial. I think the rudbeckia triloba is a short-lived perennial as well. I think technically, people define perennials as plants that live 2 or more years. And so I think some of these, probably will only reliably live for about 3 years before you need to plant them again. But the yarrow is much more permanent interest to be placing in your garden. I don't think you really have to fuss over it. And part of the reason why I am so excited about putting in more perennial flowers into my garden is because I think it's just better for the ground. So perennial roots go deeper. You don't need to water them as much yourself. It's less effort from me. I don't need to be trying to flood them with nutrients so that they can bloom or grow like a lot of annuals need to be. I don't disturb the soil and all the ecology in the soil, all the life in the soil. When I pull out the plants, like I would pull out all the annuals, these perennials just stay in place for years and years. So in addition to it being less work for me to take care of, I think it's also going to create just a healthier garden bed overall. Again, if you don't know, my boyfriend and I moved into this place maybe less than 2 years ago, and it's just a lot of fun getting to do new things, try out new things, to have this space that I can really get to look the way I want it to, but also feel like I'm taking care of this space, of this like tiny little piece of land that I have. I want it to be healthy. I want it to be great for the environment. I want it to be good for the wildlife. So I'm very excited to be putting all these plants and flowers in. Hopefully I can also find and do research on more native plants. One of the plants that we have a lot of, the flowers, they bloom in August, but if you've been to Alaska in August, you'll know fireweed. It's these gorgeous, tall, like purplish pink, magenta looking blooms. And we have a lot of those, so I also want to figure out a way, how can I purposefully have groupings of fireweed, whether, I start from seed or if I just pull it from the different parts of that they're already growing in my garden as wildflowers. Anyway, I feel like I can go on forever just rambling about all of my plans, how excited I am for everything to look, to be doing all this, to be planting. I'm excited for these things to grow. But I'll just leave it at that. In my next video, I'll show you how I am sowing some of these seeds. I am going to start some today, I think, in soil blocks, and I'll just make a quick video of that. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you did get some inspiration from this. If you do live in a colder climate or a northern climate like I do, it can be a little sad sometimes watching some videos from other channels where they can grow in different, more southern areas. They can grow a lot more heat-loving things that won't survive up here. So hopefully this is just some consolidated information for you all. Anyways, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.